Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session around the latest Trellix Mind of the CISO research entitled Closing the Gap Between Reaction and Readiness. I'm Brian Brown, Head of CISO Engagement and Senior Director of Solutions Marketing here at Trellix, and I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, John Fokker, Head of Threat Intelligence with the Advanced Research Center. So, John, we have some very interesting results around the topic of threat intelligence out of the latest Mind of the CISO research.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, let's just give the listeners a perspective on why we did this and what we found as some of the outcomes and objectives of the research. We really wanted to try and understand how our customers were using threat intelligence. Are they finding any challenges? What are the perspectives that they have around the efficacy of what they have in their environment in consuming threat intelligence and operationalizing it? Some very interesting results, and I think that's really a good place to start. Let's dive right into what we found, and I'll start with a very high-level statistic. Of the 500 respondents that we interacted with, close to 98% of them indicated that they were struggling in some way, shape, or form of operationalizing threat intelligence assets. I think that's really, really impactful and kind of sets the stage for what we want to talk about today. So, what does this really mean? Well, we entitled the report Closing the Gap Between Reaction and Readiness. And I think there's a clear need to be able to look at how threat intelligence is consumed, utilized, integrated in their environments. Maybe John, if you could comment on, from your perspective, some of the key things that really stood out to you around the findings that we had in the report.
Yeah, the initial thought, like the 98 percentage that you mentioned, that was staggering. That was like, wow. A topic that is so popular, or not even popular, but necessary. And it's not that I'm biased because I run threat intelligence for Trellix, but still, like we see like customer engagements, everybody wants to use threat intelligence, but apparently everybody's struggling. And when we zoomed in on this with this research and we looked at the results, it was like 45% of the people that were interviewed were saying that they were really struggling to keep up with new and evolving threats. So it takes them a lot of effort to stay on top of things and to understand the latest threat landscape. And then also a big amount of the 98 was 39% of the respondents said that integrations was a real tricky point. And that's something that I hear actually within the work quite a lot. Yes, there are threat intel platforms that allows for integrations of IOCs and see if you're covered or not, or give you alert correlation, as they might say. But real proactiveness, using threat intel to do threat modeling, to understand what your exposure is or your theoretical exposure, identify gaps and take precautions accordingly. That's something that is that's still like we haven't seen that as much yet. And then 38% of the interviewers said that they are struggling with regulatory and the compliance barriers. So I think there was another Mind of the CISO report previous to this one where we said like that CISOs were saying that regulatory and compliance, that load was a big portion of their work, and that was a big worry. And we see that coming back here with our more threat intelligence centric oriented interview report.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think you identified a couple of key things, that it's not just one area that presents a struggle, right? You identified things like integration issues, the ability to really understand the threat landscape. There was a multiplicity of things that were revealed as some of those statistics. And I think one of the other things that kind of goes along with that, to my mind, is that only 44% of the respondents indicated that they were taking a proactive approach to utilizing threat intelligence. So 56%, i.e. over half, were not today. So when I'm thinking about all these things, what does this really mean? Where do they need to focus? I think it's leading us to maybe an area which we can identify as helping with some of these issues. Not necessarily the silver bullet, but what do they need to really focus on going forward?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The way as we see it within threat intelligence, within like my profession, is that you have tactical, operational, strategic threat intel, just to make it simple for folks. Very tactical threat intelligence, that's the bread and butter. That's getting the latest IOCs, making sure everything's on top of things, determining if something's good or bad, all the way up to probably a limited level of attribution or classification. So what is it? What is good or bad? And then from there on, you have the operational level. And if you envision the pyramid of pain, or the with like going up in attribution, that's where the TTPs are. That's where it becomes like, okay, what tactics, what techniques are they using, what tools, how are they using those, the command lines, really how a threat actor is behaving inside maybe your network if you're defending it. And then lastly, we see like the strategic part where, okay, who's behind it? And maybe it could be a really good write-up. It could be a report that you could like hand over to your board and say like, okay, this is what's going on. And what we see is that, yes, if we look at the field, there's a lot of threat intelligence on the tactical level, and there's quite a few on the strategic level, but that operational level, really giving the SecOps practitioners the tools that they need to do their job, that's where it's lacking. And that's where the integrations have the biggest effect as well. And that's where you can become proactive. Because using that strategic and that operational knowledge, it's not only like you do a modeling exercise to understand like, okay, I'm in manufacturing or I'm in a certain part of the world. Who would be my who would be the threat actor that I need to focus on, and how do they operate? So the who is the threat actor, that could be on the strategic part, and then how do they operate? You can bring that down really operational all the way down to, okay, we have identified the threat actors. We know how they or how they conduct all their previous attacks with all the tools and all the command lines and all the TTPs. We can do a threat modeling exercise to see if we have the right tools in place to stop or detect this. And then we can do simulations around this to see, like, can we actually detect it? And are we protected? And if not, what is it that we can do to up-level our defenses and increase our security posture? And that's becoming more proactive, because essentially you're doing all these things even before the threat comes knocking at your door. And that, I often say, makes CISOs sleep comfortably at night.
As a former CISO myself, I know that I encountered a lot of struggles in really trying to pull together not just a program, but also really an understanding. The ability to really know and feel confident that I knew about what was going on. So I think you hit upon something that's really critical around the aspect of operational threat intelligence, telling that story of the threat actor. I think one other interesting thing that I see here in terms of the key findings is, there's always a lot of concern around the evolving threat landscape. I mean, this is part and parcel of what we do, right? We're here actively monitoring as cyber defenders, trying to understand what is happening at a macro scale, what is potentially inbound to us. But the two key things that I see here that are really important in my mind, especially in the current world conditions, are the fact that the majority of respondents are indicating that nation state and AI powered attacks are top of mind, are very prominent in terms of both strategy and driving budget. Does this kind of mesh with what we're seeing at a large scale in terms of the research that your team is doing?
Oh, yes, totally. It's no secret that nation state activity or state sponsored activity is a high priority of us. And then given the instability of the world, I often say geopolitical tensions are a breeding ground for APT attacks, because they either want a nation wants to use their espionage apparatus, or they want to use whatever state-sponsored apparatus to cause disruption through wipers or attacks, or they want to sow misinformation. It could be all kinds of things. So that's definitely top of mind. And AI is been, and as many of the listeners can see, if they look at our threat report that we publish twice a year, that has been a staple ever since, I believe, ChatGPT became public. It was already there, but we really focused on it because it became very public for us as defenders, as vendors, as regulators. But at the same time, it became public or top of mind for threat actors as well. And it's not to scare people off, but we made it a priority in our threat report to report on the things that we see that threat actors are talking about, the level of innovation that they're adopting to, because that's very important for us as defenders to, it's not a marketing fluff, but it's just really down and dirty, like this is what's going on right now. So you need to understand that you need to be able to arm yourself against X, Y, or Z. And at the same time, there's a difference between innovation and transformation, right? You can innovate and you can make things better with AI, like we all do. We work on whatever we write, or we use ChatGPT to do some other stuff or to look up a recipe. Criminals are doing the same thing. Maybe not a recipe, maybe they are, I don't know, they should tell me. But they use it in the same way as we do. And then just as a little tip, like a little spoiler alert, they're not, from the last thing that we see, they have not really disruptive or transformative. They've not really transformed the way they've done crime. So it's very much innovation that takes place. But it is, I can see that's key, top of mind, because these are key elements for CISOs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we've hit upon a huge number of things that were revealed out of the research, some struggles, some challenges that every organization is really facing, the desired shift potentially from reactive to proactive, looking at AI, and the last thing here that we also have as one of those outcomes is, the aspect of knowledge is power, and really sharing that community aspect, yep, which I think is critical. And love to hear just a very brief thought on sharing of information, what that means from somebody in your role.
Oh, yes, it is on multiple levels, right? In this case, CISOs were interviewed, so having a safe place where you can discuss and where you could share information, and it doesn't have to be on an IOC level. It could be like, hey, I'm struggling with this threat actor, or these are threats that are worrisome to us. How can we deal with this? And sharing that and gaining knowledge from other CISOs, that's something that really resonates with us. When we have conversations, we often have conversations with either practitioners, but also at a CISO level, and that's a completely different conversation. But across the board, sharing knowledge, I think, and that's I'm delighted with these stats, is something that a lot of people value. It has to be done right, though. It has to be in a trusted circle where you can open up, because if we cannot be vulnerable and transparent in certain cases, then there's a hesitation to share. But this gives us confidence that they're on the right road. Also with your CISO council that you run, Brian. So these are things that, yeah, it makes sense when I see it.
Great. Love that. Thank you, John. So look, we have a couple of other resources that are follow on things that you can do to take a deeper dive into the latest Mind of the CISO research. We have an ebook specifically focused on this iteration. You'll also find links there in the main Mind of CISO page to be able to download other prior pieces of research that are related to the Mind of CISO initiative. We also have a number of instructor-led courses which are available to our customers that center on topics that show how we can help with utilization and integration of threat intelligence. And John, I think you have something else that you'd like to put forth for the audience as well.
Yeah, I do. So as you know, Brian, I work within the Advanced Research Center, and we have a monthly newsletter. So if you like our content and if you want to stay on top of what we've been publishing and all these things, just go to the Trellix LinkedIn page, and there's a link to the ARC or Advanced Research Center LinkedIn newsletter. You can also reach it from our website. And between you and I, we have about 91,000 subscribers, and we're trying to hit 100K. So if everybody could do us a solid, we can reach the 100K pretty soon.
That would be amazing. And I know from taking a look at the newsletter, there's some incredibly valuable information that comes out on there. Staying on top of the threat landscape, one of those things that was highlighted as being a challenge for the respondents in the mind of the CISO, that's one of those tools that you have at your disposal. Subscribe to the ARC newsletter, and you'll find a wealth of information there. So with that, John, thank you very much for your thoughts. And thank you to everybody for listening in on today's LinkedIn Live session on Mind of the CISO research. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Brian.